Welcome to OhSister, where I unpack my Mormon sister missionary journals 10 years later. So today we're doing a little comparison activity. I'm going to not read but discuss some of the key differences between the manuals or the lesson plans that were created to teach to the groups of young men versus young women in the church, at least the ones that I learned when I was growing up and the ones that my now spouse, the ones that he was taught from when he was growing up in the church. And I want to talk about how, considering I'm looking at how my mission experience was strangely very gendering for me, and it got me even more pushed onto being like a trad wife, if you will, than before. And I want to talk about how the church overall has the system that sets people up this way. So even if you don't go on a mission, this is still kind of the worldview that you're given. So I used the Internet Wayback Machine since these manuals are not available anymore. And I found the Aaronic Priesthood Manual 3 and then also the Young Women Manual 3. And these were published in 1994 and they were still in use in 2010, which was the earliest Wayback Machine grab that I could find. So I assume, they were available earlier on the church websites, right? But the earliest I could get them from was 2010. And I was, in 2010s, that's like when I was a young woman, and that's when I was getting these lessons. So, one key difference already between the manuals, before I even discuss the lesson contents, is the titles of the manuals. We have the Aaronic Priesthood Manual and the Young Women Manual. So already there's this pretty big difference because it's not young men and young women, it's Aaronic Priesthood and young women. So there's already this differentiation between women in the church. They're either like young women or they're in the Relief Society and they're just women. But there's kind of just this, without the priesthood being involved, it's just women are their own category. They're just doing women things. And then the men have, at the same age as the young women, they're in a special group called the Aaronic Priesthood, right? And then as they age up, the men will have priesthood meeting and different priesthood quorums and things that they'll be involved in within the priesthood hierarchy or patriarchy, while women will, they'll be involved with like teaching kids in primary, or maybe they'll be involved teaching other young women, or they'll be involved teaching women, but they always stay within the organizations that are for women, and there's never anything within the priesthood per se that the women are involved in. They did just make a change that now adult women are allowed to be in charge of the Sunday school classes, which is, I suppose, a good thing, but that's not really relevant to the lessons that young people were taught when I was growing up, so I'm going to kind of focus on that, right? So there was a few things I wanted to point out. The young men manual, the Aaronic Priesthood Manual. Oh, by the way, the ages for these groups are 12 to 18. So once it's the year that you're going to turn 12, you get bumped up from primary, which is co-ed, and then you get split into groups. So in your normal 3-hour church meetings, which now that's shorter too, but when I was growing up, 3-hour church meetings, there's the sacrament meeting that has like the special sacrament ritual and then talks, and like everyone's there with their like all families are there. Then there's also then you split into either primary, where all the kids go together and it's co-ed, or the young men go to Aaronic priesthood, the young women go to young women, and then the men have their own class, right? And then the rest of the church hours are like, well, then for Sunday school, then the teenagers will go back to co-ed. But there's always this separate men and women separation for this hour. And so yeah, the young preteens to teens are getting these lessons. And then also, of course, once you turn 18, you get bumped off and you're considered an adult. So, of course, my main curiosity with this project was how many of the lessons that were taught to the Aaronic priesthood people, to the young men, how many of those were focused on marriage, family, fatherhood, preparing to be fathers, what's your role in the home as a father, what does it mean to be like a good son and a good brother, like what is kind of the gendery things. And I wanted to see how much I was taught about that as well. So how much does the Young Woman Manual talk about marriage and being a wife and being a mother and motherhood and being a daughter and like being a woman, like what does it mean to be a woman? So I went through, and I'll give you a few quick numbers and then I'll give you the overall thing. So looking at just the titles and not what is the rest of the content of the lessons, just looking at the titles only, with the title including the words father or fatherhood, there were none in the young men's. I'm just going to call it young men because it feels weird to call it Aaronic priesthood. Okay, so there were no lessons with father or fatherhood in the title of the young men's lessons, but there was one in the young women's, which is God the Father, which is like, well, that's not totally about fatherhood, but it is interesting that the young women have a lesson called God the Father when the young men don't, right? None of them had titles around motherhood because they mostly were other words chosen. So there's eternal companion is the Mormon language for like the person that you marry, is your eternal companion, your spouse. So they both actually had a lesson on an eternal companion. Interestingly, the young men, their lesson is titled Choosing an Eternal Companion, while the Young Woman's Manual has a lesson titled Preparing to Be an Eternal Companion. So already here there's this difference in framing of the young men aren't really the companion. They need to choose the companion, but the young men are kind of the main character here, whereas the young woman, it's framed explicitly to them that they are the companion. They need to prepare, in fact, to be an eternal companion. The young men, they need to just be good main characters and know how to choose a good companion. But the young women are the ones who are supposed to be the companion, and it's something that they have to work towards. Then if we go to merit titles with marriage or dating combined, like talking about marriage or dating, the young men have one lesson. It's Celestial Marriage, a preparation for eternity. And the young women have three. They have temple marriage, marriage standards, and dating decisions. And I'll note here that a lot of the lessons that I'll go forward about, I actually read through them all because I wanted to see, not only what's in the title, but what's in the content. So even in these few examples we have of the young men's lessons that do discuss, marriage and dating or eternal companions or women or, what I will discuss, the majority of the ones that are either mention it or kind of focus on like this aspect of gender and family life and marriage, the frame is about just sort of the doctrinal importance of the concept. It's usually like marriage is important, and if you aren't married, you won't be exalted. And that's kind of the gist of it for the men. Versus for the women, it's like marriage is super important. Marriage is your purpose. Marriage is something you need to be ready for, and like there's all this meaning and training, and like here's how to do this and here's how to do this, right? So there's, even with a discussion of the young men getting a lesson on celestial marriage, it's really more about the doctrine than about like their own preparation for it. Whereas the women are learning about the doctrine of temple marriage, but they're also like, here's how to live to be ready for marriage. Like, what are marriage standards? What should your marriage look like? And then there's also, for the women, a lesson on dating decisions. So they need to, not the young men, but the young women have more extensive training on what is appropriate dating and how important dating is for them, because the rest of their life kind of hinges on whether or not they marry. So it's more competitive for a young woman to be ready to be married, to be a good eternal companion, and then they are sort of preparing their whole life to be ready for this, and then the young men show up at the dating years and marry them, and then the young woman is prepared, right, to fill that very specific big role, encompassing role of the rest of her life is all about being a wife and a mother. Okay, so next we've got which one includes men or man. On this one, the young men are the only ones with a one, but the lesson is every young man should serve a mission. So, not necessarily a healthy topic from my current perspective, but reading through it, the point of the lesson wasn't that they should serve a mission because this will prepare them to be good, faithful fathers and husbands, but it was just like, this is your duty, you need to do this, right? There's also one lesson for the young men with the word son in the title, which is being sons of the living God. But again, it's not super focused on gender, the way that so the young women have one with daughter. They have living as a daughter of God, so the young men have sons of the living God. It's kind of it's just kind of stating the doctrinal belief of like, okay, you're a son of God, here's all these different things in the doctrine, versus when the young women have their lesson about being a daughter of God, it's living as a daughter of God. So there's, of course, the teaching of the doctrine, but then there's also the expectation of like, well, what does it mean for you to live as a daughter of God? Like, everything you do reflects on God. You need to like stay worthy and holy and virtuous, and there's all this implication in gender instruction around how you live as a daughter of God, and not just sort of a basic statement of belief or doctrine, right? Then we have women or woman. So there was one lesson for the young men. Their lesson is, an Aaronic priesthood holder cherishes womanhood. And there are two for the young women. They are fulfilling women's divine roles and a woman's responsibility to teach. So I won't get into these too much, because we're going to start to get into lessons that have just kind of abominably straightforward, like really sexist and misogynist like teachings that are being explicitly taught to like young people and telling them that this is the way to view the world and this is how they need to think, which is horrible. But just pointing out, there's in the young men's lesson, there's this one lesson where they're like, okay, you as someone who holds the priesthood power of God, as someone with God's power and authority, and there's a lot of lessons where the young men learn about the priesthood, which they now have, and they learn that they now act with God's power and authority, and that the authority that they have as holders of the Aaronic priesthood, already as 12-year-old boys with this, they have more power and authority than any other worldly office, because they have the power and authority of God. So that's like their frame of reference, or at least that's the taught frame of reference for what it means to be a man, someone who has the priesthood. And with their lesson on womanhood, they're taught that they should cherish womanhood. Here are just a few excerpts from that lesson. There's this framing, there's really only this mention of women as women in relation to them or their fathers, like women in relationship to a man. So for example, they say, let me find it. View women properly, honor and serve them. Treat mothers and daughters well. Treat your mothers and sisters well, because that will determine how you treat your wives and daughters. So if you practice now treating your mother and your sisters well, then you will treat your wife and your daughter well, which is important. There's also the instruction to consider the role that what your mother does, and they're like, wow, think about everything your mom does for you, and they list all these things like she gave you life, she encourages you, she overlooks your faults, she keeps up hope for you longer than anyone else, she washes and presses your clothes, she cooks your food, she keeps your house clean, she nurses you when you're sick, she establishes the quality of home that you enjoy. And then they say these are all the qualities of motherhood. So they're like teaching young men, that the things that are what women do is to be a mother, and the things that mothers do is basically everything within the house and everything within relationship to the child. And then they're given this instruction for, there are only a few times where they're like explicitly taught about like the sort of in the future when you need to get married, here's what you do. And here's one of the points. It says, they need to hold women in high esteem, and that they should seek the most spiritual, competent, and kind women. So they're like, the expectation by the people writing the manual is that there are a lot of incompetent women, or that women are incompetent in general. So they should do their best to try to find someone who is the most competent as possible, right? I find that really offensive now. But that's just totally normal within the frame of thinking of the people who wrote the manual. And then they say, after marriage, your obligation is to help your family obey the commandments of the Lord, and you have a responsibility to help women keep the commandments. AKA, you have a responsibility to teach women and tell them what to do. And there were very few points when I was reading through all of these where they say explicitly what men are even supposed to do once they're married. But the few points that they did, they say, here's what you're in charge of. You are in charge of being the patriarch. You're in charge of helping your family obey the Lord and helping women keep the commandments. So you are going to be the one calling the shots. And you are gonna help your family obey the Lord. Meanwhile, the young woman, going back to their lessons that include womanhood in the title, they're learning that they need to fulfill women's divine roles. There's nothing about men's divine roles, right? But women, since they don't have the priesthood, and there needs to be all this training so that the house runs smoothly when the marriage happens. They're specifically taught, you have roles as a woman that you're going to have to do, and we're going to have to teach you what they are, because it might not be intuitive for you unless you're taught your whole life what it is. And then we're also going to throw in the word divine so that it feels nice. When we're giving you this big long list of chores you're always going to have to do for everyone. So we're not just going to say fulfilling women's roles, we say fulfilling women's divine roles. And then it's like, oh, this is what I'm meant to do. It's my purpose, so I don't mind, right? That's the way it's framed. And then there's also a woman's responsibility to teach, which then goes on to say you're responsible to teach your children, not you're responsible to teach like adult men, because we just learned the men are going to be the ones really in charge. And this is actually a really interesting difference here, right? Because we just learned that the young men are being told in the one moment where they're actually being instructed on what's they're going to be in charge of when they're married. It's that it's their obligation to help their wives and their children obey the commandments of God. But then the women are being given instruction that, well, it's their responsibility to teach the children. So the women are going to be doing all this work behind the scenes, and they've been trained that the salvation of their children depends on them being the one to make sure their children know everything about the gospel. But then the young men are going to think that, like, they might see their wife working hard to try to teach their children. They might not, but they might not even know that the women were taught that they're responsible to teach the kids. But the young men are just going to think, well, it's my responsibility to make sure the kids obey. It's like, that's a strange sort of blind spot between the genders, as you will, at least the way it's framed here. Going to the word home, we have one actually in both, but the young men, their lesson is effective home teaching, which is not really about their own home. It's they're supposed to go basically bother other church members, and that's part of their, everyone has to go around and bother other church members, but the young men get a lesson on it. Whereas the young women, this lesson is creating a spiritual environment in the home. So again, here's this specific instruction for the women are responsible once they're married and they're practicing now in their own families to do all these different ideas that are provided, as well as to think of other ideas of how to have a nice spiritual environment in the home. That's going to be their responsibility when they're married. Lessons on the temple. The young men have 2, the young women have 4. Lessons on the priesthood, which is, you would think the men would have more, but the men have 2 lessons on the priesthood that include priesthood, and the young women have 30. And interestingly, within the young women's lessons, 2 of them are about family, right? Like, they learn about the priesthood, sort of basic doctrinal aspects, but then there's still this big emphasis on how important it's going to be for your future family to have the priesthood, and how tragic it is for women who are married and then they don't have the priesthood in their family. So there's all this, like, you got to be thinking about your future marriage and your future family and what's going to be best for your family, and that's going to be on your shoulders, right? And so the last topic I'm going to cover is how many lessons contain the word family, right? Because the church has this whole thing about how they're all about families, they're all about family, and that's like, when it comes down to it, that's the most important thing. See, if that was totally to be trusted, I would think that they would talk about family equally with the young men and young women. But at least from these manuals, the young men have 1 lesson and the young women have 7. And the 1 lesson the young men have is the eternal importance of families, right? And reading through it, it doesn't really talk about how important it is going to be for them to prepare now to be a father and to think all the time about being a father and to write a letter to their future companion, their future eternal companion, right? It's just like, you can't be saved if you don't have like an eternal family. And here's like the doctrine around it, right? And like, you need to protect your patriarchal lineage. Versus the women, here are the 7 lessons that have family just in the title. They have contributing to family life, eternal families, encouraging family unity, encouraging enjoyable family activities, extended family relationships, the priesthood can bless families, and learning about family history and temple work. So there's a lot more of like, not just discussing some of the basic LDS doctrine around like what family means and how like your eternal progression from the pre-earth life to exaltation is tied into your family, which is like what the young men learn. The young women have 7 lessons that talk about their responsibilities within the family, their responsibility to their ancestors, to do their family history and temple work, and also to their posterity to be good examples in doing family history and temple work. They're being trained to be socially aware and kind of always looking out for issues and dealing with family dynamics, like encouraging family unity, dealing with extended family relationships, like there might be problems there, how to contribute to family life, even encouraging enjoyable family activities. You know, like I don't think any of these are necessarily bad on their own, but if only the women are being given these lessons and the men are just being taught that family is of eternal importance for their own salvation, where women are learning all of these things that are super important and they're being trained in all these skills to have enjoyable family activities and to work through extended family relationships and encouraging family unity and contributing to family life, and that the priesthood can bless families, right? It's like there's a really big difference here. So that's the point I'm getting at today, right? It's basically, it's just, there's this really unfair difference. And the best way that I could think of to describe it is there's language within Mormonism and even within the temple, but even like not thinking about the temple, there's a lot of language in Mormonism around, there's like a veil of forgetfulness, right? Veils feature a lot in the linguistics of the doctrine and theology. So there's this common idea within Mormonism that like when you come to earth, there's like this veil of forgetfulness is what it's called, and you forget everything from before and you get a chance to come here like with a clean slate and prove to yourself and to God that you can still choose to be a good person even though you don't remember all of the reasons why you want to do that. And then when you die, so this time on earth is sort of a trial for you to prove that even if you don't remember all of your old beliefs and things, that when you come here and you still are a good person at your core, and then you die and you're like, yes, look, I proved to you that I'm worthy and I'm a good person, and oh, conveniently the veil of forgetfulness is gone and you're able to remember the stuff from before as well, right? And there's also this idea in the temple of like remembering or learning about how when we are ready to be like resurrected and move on to sort of being with Christ and God again in heaven, like really oversimplifying this, then you like prove your knowledge and your worthiness or whatever, and then eventually like you will be taken through the veil and you will be able to be like back in heaven, like past the veil. And there's also use of veils in temple ceremonies. I guess they changed it so that women don't actually veil their faces anymore, but for the majority of Latter-day Saint history, including all of my time in the church, it was normal for the women to veil their faces during the part that was like considered to be the most sacred or whatever. And that was symbolic, right? There's a lot of symbolism and meaning that people can find around, like, does it feel nice to veil my face and to show like humility or obedience, or does it feel demeaning to veil my face when the men don't, right? There's a lot of discussion there, but the meaning I have about a veil in this point is the people who are given the lessons of the path of the young men, right, in the church, they go through and they learn the messaging of the church. They learn just sort of the core doctrines, still kind of harmful, in my opinion, messages. A lot of the things that I was reading, I was like, honestly, this still feels like culty and harmful to me, just the stuff I was reading for the young men. But their path through the church education and the church experience from like 12 and on is very just focused on the doctrine, and that's it, right? While the women, people who go through the church through the women's side, right, there's this layer on the lessons. So the young women also learn about, Jesus Christ and the restoration and the plan of salvation, and the young women also learn about the sort of core basic essential doctrine, but they have this extra layer or this extra veil that they have to learn to see the world through, and of everything that it means for them to be women in the church. So they're learning all the ins and outs of just in general how to live the gospel and what it is and how to be worthy now, and also simultaneously learning and having it all interconnected, they're practicing and preparing for what is going to be expected of them in their future as a wife and a mother. So they're basically meshing all of this in for decades, right? Especially from 12 to 18, they're getting this more and more specific training of the gospel and your divine role as a woman, whereas the young men lessons are the gospel, right? They have these two different paths for a decade. And I'm gonna get to the numbers now, right? So the young men, their lessons, out of the 49 lessons that they had, the number of lessons that are specifically about preparing for marriage and family were 9. At least 9 that at least mention marriage and family, right? 9 out of the 49, or 18%. And the lessons that are actually focused on like marriage and even even with a focus on marriage, it's not like, here's all the stuff you need to be doing and like this is going to be your main way of being happy, right? It's just sort of, it's like marriage is going to be vital. Like you have to get married if you're going to heaven, right? Then the number goes down to 4 or 8% of the lessons in the manual for the young men. So 8% of the lessons, between 8 and 18% of the lessons in the manual for the Aaronic priesthood are about preparing for marriage and family. So for the young women, the number of lessons that are focused on preparing for marriage and family is 21 out of 58, or 36% of the lessons. And then if you go to the lessons that at least talk about, if not focus on, preparing for marriage and family, it was 42 out of 58, or 72%. And I'll point out here, actually, that when I was reading through these, there were many of the lessons in the Young Woman's Manual that were not saved in the Wayback Machine. So I think there were more of these. So I think the number of lessons that were focused on preparing for marriage and family specifically is more like 50%, and I think the number of lessons that at least mention marriage and family is going to be closer to the 90 to 100% range. Yeah. So comparing the numbers between 18% to 72%, 8% to 36%, there are 4.5 times more lessons for the young woman that are focused on marriage and family. And there are 4 times more lessons that just at least mention marriage and family, preparing for marriage and family, than the young men. So even like considering the fact that there's probably even more, because I couldn't read all of the lessons, that's already a really big difference. And I want to explain again the differences in the lessons, because like hearing like, well, the young men, they at least had like 18% of their lessons like mentioned preparing for marriage and family. So I'm just gonna read the key themes of what was actually included in those lessons. So they were taught that the young men are taught marriage is, okay, wait, I want to specifically say people who were given the lessons for young men, because I'm fully aware that not everyone who had those lessons was a young man. And also, I want to say people who were given lessons for the young woman, because I know not everyone in those rooms was a woman, right? So I'm sorry I don't always say that, but that is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, people who are given the lessons for the young men, they're taught marriage is a protection of patriarchal lineage and authority. They are taught that marriage is necessary for you to be exalted. They are taught that women matter in relation to you, like your mother, your sister, and eventually your wife and your daughter. And they are taught in marriage you become the natural patriarch of your family. Whereas women, or the women's lessons, teach things like it's important to respect and obey the priesthood. They are taught that marriage and motherhood is where you find happiness and your purpose. And they are taught that your first vocation is to be a homemaker, and if tragedy strikes, it might be good to have some sort of secondary thing to fall back on should you have to earn money in case your husband dies. There is a lesson specifically on that, on choosing a vocation. But the first thing they make sure to discuss is, yeah, we're going to talk about choosing a vocation, but remember your purpose is to be a homemaker. So most of you probably won't even do this, but if you need to be able to make money, here are some things to think about, right? So the framing is very different here. And I thought this quote that's included in one of the lessons for the Aaronic Priesthood Manual is a pretty good a pretty good view of the way that the church manual writers think men should think about women. So here's this quote. This is from, I think, Spencer W. Kimball, but I don't remember exactly and I didn't write it down. So you can look that up if you want to. But the quote is, "There is nothing in the teachings of the gospel which declares that men are superior to women. The most noble, exalting calling of all is that which has been given to women as the mothers of men. Women do not hold the priesthood, but if they are faithful and true, they will become priestesses and queens in the kingdom of God." So I think if I had read that quote when I was young, even though this quote was in the Young Men's Manual, I would have been like, oh, okay, they say I'm gonna accept them. I'm accepting this for what they say. They say that the gospel doesn't teach that men are superior to women. And they're trying to say that line. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying to say, we don't think that men are superior to women, and we don't think that men should think that they're superior to women, even though the majority of the lessons and the majority of this lesson actually teaches otherwise. And the ironic example, I don't know, maybe ironic is not the right word, but the ironic example that they give to prove that they think that men are not superior to women is they say, "The most noble, exalting calling of all that has been given to women is for women to have is to be the mothers of men." So in trying to prove that women are not inferior to men, the example that you give is that women are lucky enough to be a man's mother, and that is the most wonderful calling. It's like, look, we think you're great because you make men. And it's only the lessons for the young men, the Young Men's Lesson Manual, rarely mentions women at all. And then if there are mentions of women, it's either good women who are a good example and you should protect them and value them, and they're your wives, your mothers, your sisters, your daughters, or there are like wicked temptresses who are trying to get you to sin and they're human butterflies trying to tempt you was one quote that I thought it made me gasp when I read it. Yeah. So that's pretty striking difference, right? So going back to the point I'm making, this veil of just living the gospel and seeing that and being like, this is how it is if you're raised as a man and you live as a man in the church, versus, oh, there's all this is the gospel, but also here's what it means for me to be a woman in the gospel, and here's what I'm responsible for, and I need to like make sure I'm coddling the feelings of my priesthood holding husband. There's this extra load, this extra hidden load on LDS women, right? On LDS wives and LDS mothers. At least within the system that the church is trying to create and maintain through their lesson manuals, right? This is through their lesson manuals. That's where these differences are being reinforced. And of course, we see this everywhere, but even just in the lesson manuals, we see this being set up. And the problem is the the young man who goes to Young Men's every Sunday and he goes on his mission, he grew up learning about the gospel and that he has to be married to be exalted. And then he gets married and then is being a provider and all that. And then his wife, which is how, it's framed, not just the person he marries, but his wife, she has grown up being taught all the gospel stuff and also all the extra wife, mother, daughter stuff. And we get these points of friction where there's all this invisible, unseen layer. There's this extra veil of womanhood and femininity, and the now adult man has been taught to choose a companion who will be this way, but he doesn't even know all the stuff she's doing, but he knows to be mad at her if she's not doing it. And then the woman is like doing all of the family, household, homemaking, everything, because that's what she was taught. And she's supposed to also respect and obey the priesthood holding husband and be grateful for him having the decency to be worthy of having the priesthood. So there's just this built-in system of injustice where the grown men are not even aware of the years of training and socializing that the women have gone through, and the men don't know all of the work that they're benefiting greatly from, and they also get upset if it doesn't happen. And I'm not saying this is the case for every adult LDS man, but I know that this is a pattern that I've seen and is a pattern I was taught. Whereas the adult women now have all of this responsibility of not only living the gospel for themselves, but being in charge of their entire family, their entire family's beliefs and practices, and their entire household, and managing all of the money, but also like serving their community. And they're not supposed to be having their own life. Their life is supposed to be managing everyone else's life. And I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for my own experience, is that leads to me having a lot of anger and resentment. And I didn't even live the traditional expected Mormon woman path of being a wife and a mother and having all of these things that I was taught about what that means, doing that, because we left the church before we had kids. And then I was like, oh, well, I'm not going to just immediately have kids. I'm going to take the time to try to unpack all of this and understand what I really want, because I was told my whole life, and excessively repeatedly told starting when I was 12, that the most important thing about my existence and the thing that will make me the happiest is for me to be a wife and a mother. And it's how do I know what I want when I had to be brainwashed that it was what I want? Is that really that intuitively happy making for every woman if you have to drill it into them, right? That's suspicious. So, yes, there's this unspoken and to the husband some unexplained labor of keeping an eye out on the kids, being a perfectly virtuous partner and wife and mother, managing extended family relationships, managing the budget. There's all these things that young women are trained to do, and it's designed to be invisible and unseen by the partner. And in my experience, there's this, even now that I'm outside of living this on purpose, it still comes up a lot for me because I was taught this for so long, and I have all this anger and resentment around Like, wow, I was like trained to just automatically like take charge of all of these things in our household, and even when we're trying to like think about it and be careful about me not automatically doing it, I have a lot of feelings about it. And I cannot imagine how much more difficult it would be for me if I was still believing all of this, and if I was also dealing with being a mom, like not only all of the physical difficulties of like getting pregnant, being pregnant, having the child postpartum, and then like the huge amount of responsibility that then comes with caring with that child. Like I don't know how anyone is handling the resentment of dealing with that life with these two different dichotomies, with the veil of divine womanhood over everything, because it's crazy making. So I want to close out this section with a quote from just one of the lessons that the young woman manual had, from the lesson of preparing to become an eternal companion. So there's a short story given of a young woman who comes back home after college, and she's helping her mom wash the dishes, and she's talking about how, wow, mother, I've learned, like, I'm not ready to be a wife yet. Like, now I'm on my own, and I've got roommates, and I'm like learning about how I handle different relationships with people, and I'm learning about my homemaking skills, or my lack of homemaking skills, ha ha ha. And like, I wish I paid attention more to like how you do the regular cleaning, cooking, budgeting things. And boy, Mom, I'm glad I get a chance to practice this now, right? That's how the lesson kind of opens, with this story of a young woman wishing she had learned these, paid more attention when she was younger, and having the chance to still learn more now before her marriage. She's like, I'm glad I can practice on my roommates before I have a husband. And then here's what they tell the teacher to say. They say, explain that women today fill a variety of roles. There is one role, however, that most women will take on at some time in their lives. Ask the young women what they think that role is. And then they have wife as the expected answer. The young woman should know to say that. It continues, how a young woman fulfills this role will determine to a great extent her own eternal happiness and the happiness of those close to her. And then there's finishing a quotation from a past prophet of the church, President Spencer W. Kimball. The quote is, young women should plan and prepare for marriage and the bearing and rearing of children. It is your divine right and the avenue to the greatest and most supreme happiness. I have been having a great time working on this project, and it takes a lot of time every week to keep this up. If you have the desire and the means to support me financially, it really helps a lot. Of course, I have the disclaimer that your donations will not bring eternal salvation for you or anyone else. But there are links in the description where you can make a one-time donation, or you could sign up to join my monthly patrons to support this and my other creative work. Thank you. Monday, August 17th, 2015. Mission Day 311. What a day! We started out just great, and we ended on exchanges. Sister Frost discovered a surprise $60 on her MSF. So today she bought fancy raw honey, farmer's market tomatoes, and accidentally lame forever stamps. We did our laundry at the Upson's home, during which I wrote Mom a card along with a letter for Rowan. I promised I'd draw them manga style, so I finally did that. I forgot to take a picture, so hopefully Rowan keeps it. I'm with Sister Henry now. She was around back in the early days of the Grand Forks zone, so she was one transfer older than I and served in Grand Forks. We've actually been on an exchange together before in Grand Forks. That was a good reunion. She brought to my attention the fact that she only has 4 transfers after this one, which means I only have 5, which means this may be my last time training. Frowny face. Sadness. Okay, kind of a short entry for once. This week has a few longer ones. So yeah, I'll just note $60 extra on Sister Frost's monthly food allowance. So that was nice. I think at this point I was already pretty much out of money. And so of course $60 was a little bit more, a little bit more than it is now. It goes further now, back in 2015, but that still wasn't a ton of money. But she splurged on fancy honey, nice tomatoes, and stamps. So that tells you what a splurge is when you're a missionary, right? Also noticing that we did our laundry at the Upson's home, and I did not explain, in the last week, I wrote about getting coins to do laundry at the laundromat. So, and I was kind of surprised to read that when I was reading through it, because I was like, I don't remember going to the laundromat in this area. And yeah, so I guess at our Sunday meeting or something, the Upsons must have found out that we were doing laundry at the laundromat, and they're like, no, you gotta come to our house and do laundry here. And I think the Upsons the Upsons come up a lot more in this area. I'm assuming I'll write about them because, we at least saw them every week to do laundry, but we got a lot more involved with them. So I think I'll talk about the Upsons more, but, there's just a little hack for you that if you want to see the missionaries more often, let them do laundry at your house. But yeah, it was also, to be a little more serious, I am grateful for the people who stepped in and helped us out in ways like this, like the kind of regular money things, because it was already so hard to have enough money. It was hard to have the time to budget and think about money the way that I would need to if I was going to live off of the small amount of money that we had, right? To make a list, a grocery list and meal plan. There wasn't even really time for that. So, and also I didn't really know how to do it as well as I do now that I'm 10 years older. But yeah, when I also had to use my food money to pay for laundry, it was I'm running out of food. So that did really help me, not go without food as much. So that is, really kind of them. Also a shame that that's the situation I was in, when I honestly, if there was any organization that I was working for them 24/7, I should have been getting paid, right? But I wasn't. But we've discussed that ad nauseum. I just want to point out the last part of this entry is talking with Sister Henry, and Sister Henry is like, oh yeah, I only have 4 more transfers after that. And I was like, wait, that means I only have 5. And that's crazy because my time is getting shorter, right? I'm like already more than halfway through, which was feeling weird for sure. It would be in October, it would have been like when I had been out for a full year and I only had 6 months left. So it was more, it wasn't all the way, but my time was decreasing. But it's interesting to me that what I wrote about having only 5 transfers left wasn't like, oh my gosh, I'm going home soon, how exciting or how sad. What I wrote was, oh, this might be my last time training. And I think that's just me, that's showing how I was thinking about, like, gosh, I really want to be a sister training leader, and I'm kind of expecting that to happen. I'm hoping it's going to happen. Like, I kind of want those bragging rights. So, like, oh man, Heavenly Father, like, I bet this is the last time I train, right? Because there's not really going to be time for me to train again and be a sister training leader. So I'm probably going to be a sister training leader after this. So this is probably my last time training. I think that's what I was like signaling there. Okay, we'll keep going. Tuesday, August 18th, 2015, mission day 312. Sister Henry and I woke up at 6:20 so we could go running together. Oh, so we could go running longer. Oh, man. 6:20, go running longer. Ugh, okay. I don't think I'm going to make Sister Frost wake up early, but it was nice today. So at ZTM, Zone Training Meeting, they announced that we shouldn't have weekly manual labor service projects anymore, which means that today was our last day helping at Parks and Rec. I quite enjoyed raking sticks and leaves with her, especially as we shared things we've learned on our missions. I felt really bad telling the manager that we can't come help anymore, but we wrote him a quick note with a Book of Mormon pass-along card at least. I also got an opportunity to jump into a pile of leaves, which is an important part of fall, I feel. We visited Sister Ulrich, the independent 94-year-old sister in the branch. We'll probably visit her once a week. She's lonely and has a lot of wisdom to share. She's lost some confidence in being able to talk with people, so I'm excited to keep visiting. We found the Cambridge family. They just moved in next door to Sister Ulrich. What an amazing family. Sister Cambridge, Helena, has been to the temple, and her husband Dan isn't a member, but he acts like one. He's even held callings in Scouts. We got a fun tour of their upstairs at the insistence of their 4-year-old, and Helena came up with their toddler. I'd love to teach Brother Cambridge, but definitely on his time. After this awesome family, we stopped by Sister Stimson. She's not doing so well. I could feel a very strong absence of the spirit in her dark house. She has a lot of anger and bitterness and pain. She spent an hour telling us her woes, and I am so glad Sister Frost was in Bismarck. We eventually just cut in, gave her a Plan of Salvation pamphlet, and left her with a prayer. Phew. In the car, Sister Henry immediately advised we shouldn't go there alone, and I think we'll pass that on to the future missionaries. I was worn out and depressed a bit after that, so our media hour was well timed. Sister Henry cried about the Bible videos. I was inspired by the Work of Salvation Ward Council trainings, and we left as a whole very edified and uplifted. We had a cool finding experience today. We stopped by Craig and Cordelia's home and figured out a time when they'll know we can come over. And then Francine was home, and now we officially know she's not interested. This was exciting because we've been trying to catch her for 2 weeks, so we just wanted to know. This street was feeling pretty golden then, so we walked down and saw a guy out hand-washing his car. We went and talked with him. His name is Jordan, and while he wasn't too excited by the first vision, we did schedule a meeting for Sunday to go over the Plan of Salvation. Woohoo! The teaching pool will grow, slowly but surely. On our way back to Bismarck, I made sure we stopped and got her a field is white, as well as a sunflower picture. And now I'm back with Sister Frost. Alright, so, first thing to point out is it's lame that we had to stop doing community service and helping at the park. You know, I can see why they were like, we don't want the missionaries to be doing unhelpful menial labor tasks where they're not talking to people and they're not actually spreading the gospel. We only want them to be doing missionary service when they can actively be proselyting. Like, I get that. But I thought it was nice for us to sort of be a stable presence in the community and be helpful. And also it was nice for us to have a break. Alas, that was not to be. So I had one last chance to sort of enjoy outdoor work at all. Which, when that's one of the most enjoyable parts of your week, that's a pretty sucky week. But, you know, I got a chance to jump in a pile of leaves after we raked it, and it was one small moment of joy. Skipping to the Cambridge family, I won't talk about them, but I'm just going to point out that they will be relevant in the future. I was always wanting to convert Brother Cambridge, but he's going to be a really tough case to convert, so keep that in mind in the coming weeks. I wanted to also point out just a missionary lingo moment here, where in the last area we were in, there was a street that was feeling pretty golden, so we were walking around and getting lots of people who were interested. So yeah, golden was one of the go-to descriptors for people are interested, their hearts are soft, they are prepared, they're ready to feel the Spirit and to accept the truthfulness of the full gospel. And also the field is white picture is with reference to DNC. Gosh, I should maybe look it up, but I don't know. One of the DNC somethings, it's like 84 maybe. It's probably not 84, but the field is white, all ready to harvest, and there's like this like short like 8 verses of missionary work, and the field is white refers to like wheat, right? And we're gonna go get the wheat. There's also big biblical reference, but there's also specifically a like Doctrine and Covenants thing about this that's specifically for missionaries. Anyway, what I'm talking about this is because we were in the rural North and South Dakotas, there were lots of fields of plants, of various plants. And we happened to be by a field, not only at fields of sunflowers, but also, well, flax was really pretty, but also wheat. So I was able to get myself a really cool picture of me with like my missionary tag standing in the wheat field that was like white and all ready to harvest, And I had to make sure that when I was on exchanges with, what was the Sister Harris? Sister Henry, that was like, hey, while you're here out of the big city, cities don't get very big in North Dakota, but while you're here, we got to stop and get you a really cool missionary picture of you standing in the field of wheat. So that's what I was talking about there. But the main thing about this, was visiting Sister Stimson and the sort of dark spiritual demonic descriptors I was giving this person and her house, which is strange now to look back on. I'll just reread. We stopped by Sister Stimson. She's not doing well. I could feel a very strong absence of the spirit in her dark house. She has a lot of anger and bitterness and pain, and she spent an hour telling us her woes, right? And then Sister Henry, the sister training leader, was there with me, and afterwards she's like, you shouldn't go there alone, like, it's dangerous spiritually. And I honestly don't remember the situation, so it might have been just like an unfortunate situation of like a woman who was like depressed and like probably bitter and angry for a reason, and probably in pain for a reason, right? And maybe we weren't the best people to go in and like try to fix that, for sure. But I mean, we weren't the best people to go in and fix anyone's problems. So I just think it's weird that we're like, oh no, the lights are dim in here and there's this angry woman, and that's too dangerous for us to go to because the devils, like, there's no spirit there. But there are all these other situations that we're getting into that are way more dangerous, actually, but we're just like, whatever, it's fine. And now I'm like, my sense of what was dangerous and what was just like maybe sad but not dangerous was totally out of whack, and this is a pretty good example of that. And of course, since we were all worn out and depressed after visiting Sister Stimson's haunted house, we had a media hour planned, and because that was like once a week we were allowed to have an hour looking at the internet of like church stuff. So I would basically use that time to get filled in on church news, or just look up and watch the like church Mormon messages, or, you know, like, it was all just church stuff. So even though we could technically access the internet for an hour, it was still very monitored. Well, we were self-monitoring, but there were rules about basically we couldn't look at anything, right? But yeah, the funny thing about this was, so Sister Henry watched the church's new Bible videos, and those were so touching, and she cried. And I spent my time trying to uplift myself after such a depressing experience by watching their new training videos for the Ward Council. And they were themed on the work of salvation, or like this thing that they were promoting at the time. I don't know if Ward Councils are still doing this or if they've got something else, but at that time there was this really strong push to have everyone be really involved in the work of salvation. And the work of salvation was like your own family, missionary work, and then temple work. It's like all those things together are the work of salvation. And I was curious about these videos because I was like, I wonder how inspiring this Ward Council training video actually is, like, or at least how inspiring it would be to me now. And I actually found the churches on the Wayback Machine. I found their training stuff, and I found the links to the videos. The videos are not logged in there, but I found one of them on YouTube. So I'm gonna link that in the description. I'm not gonna read through that because I know this is gonna be a pretty long episode. But if you want to watch a 6-minute video that is part of the, like, I don't know, it's like 6 or 7 video segments with trainings on different topics. This was the one on the Ward mission leader and his role in the work of salvation with the Ward Council. You can watch it and you can see what was the level of what was considered to be inspiring to me at this time, and what would be such a positive, uplifting experience that it would drag me out of a tiredness and depressing situation. And I'll just say it's not very it's not very inspiring. We're the bottom of the barrel scraps. Not a very exciting, impressive video, but you should go check it out and see just how sad and how sad and unimpressive that inspirational video was, really. Wednesday, August 19th, 2015, mission day 313. Wednesdays, ... We got to do an awesome discussion with Charity. She just loved reading the Restoration last night, and she was so excited when she shared what she learned about how Jesus' atonement is central to everything. We then went through the Restoration pamphlet and taught her like we'd teach an investigator, which was great since that's the first time Sister Frost and I have been able to teach that together. The Wades in Tioga discussion was less exciting, more meh. We didn't exactly have a plan, and also Laurie kept getting so passionate that she'd treat Ron like an aged member and go all Kolob, which would drive the spirit away immediately. It's hard to talk about family/eternal life in part-member families, I'm learning. At least, at the end, we found out what some of Brother Ron's concerns are. We'll need to help him understand why we have prophets next time. The Hankersons fed us dinner. It's a great thing they have a recently returned missionary in the home, because otherwise I think it would be hard to leave on time. Heh. Don Carlos totally knew we didn't really have a set appointment after dinner. He just used his missionary powers. Oh, that family will keep us accountable. And Charity already just wants to hang out with us all day. But we finally met Wanda Linscott, and she just let us in and we talked with her. She said she'd like to go on a senior mission, so at least the desire is still there. We're also going to teach her son Nick. Hopefully he'll want to be baptized, and hopefully we can work out a way to teach Wanda's boyfriend Casey while we're at it. So we did actually have a good evening appointment. Afterwards, we stopped by Stella's home again. She's never been taught before, and she wasn't home last time we were scheduled. But she was out on the porch with her 15-year-old son, and we shared the first vision, and she was just nodding her head, and she wants us to come back. Oh, Stella, just let us teach you. Okay, so pretty much just stuff about teaching. I guess the stuff about the Hankersons is what I was kind of writing around because I assumed it would be obvious, was when members really liked the missionaries and they liked to have us over, often it would be like we would end up being there too long. And we had been recently trained several times on how important it was to not stay more than an hour with members. So I was just like, yeah, Don Carlos was just back from his mission, so he was like, guys, remember, like, the sisters have to leave. They have an appointment after dinner, so we just have this hour. So that's what I was referencing there. The main thing here is the situation with the Wade family. So part member families is Latter-day Saint speak for some people in the family are Mormon, active or not, and some people are not Mormon. So we were teaching Brother Wade, Ron Wade. He was not Mormon, and Laurie was Mormon, and she really wanted to get married in the temple and do all the, she wanted to do the whole package that you're supposed to do when you're Mormon, and she had to get her husband to get baptized and kind of get on the same page as her. And he had been pretty patient with the missionaries. He was quitting smoking, if you remember, and we're having this discussion, and we kept having the problem. Well, what I wrote was, we kept having the problem because that Laurie was so excited to finally be able to talk about this stuff that instead of just covering the sort of super bare minimum basics that we were taught to tell people, she was like telling Ron, her husband, like all of the stuff, like going all Kolob, how missionaries would say. And I wrote that would drive the spirit away immediately, which is really interesting to look back on and see, because I was noticing that if I was talking to someone about, if I was teaching someone the missionary lessons, and if we were actually forthright and shared with them like a more of the actual doctrine and theology, rather than just like, here's some little tiny breadcrumbs, the ones that feel nice, like instead we're going to give you the whole thing, it was counterproductive. And it's like, I noticed that it felt less spiritual when we were teaching someone the entirety of the religious beliefs. That's suspicious, but I was so primed to be like, no, we're just supposed to teach them the small stuff, and then they get baptized, and then slowly, line upon line, precept upon precept, they'll learn everything. But we know it's too overwhelming to teach them everything all at once, up front. So we just need to teach them the small little important things. Like families can be together forever and not, if you accept the law of celestial marriage, which is originally to Joseph's time, includes plural polygamous marriage, then you will go on to become gods and goddesses yourselves in the next life, right? Like, if you teach that to new people, they're gonna be like, wait, what? That's weird. That's not just like, oh yeah, I could be with my family forever. So I'm like seeing the sort of trap around hiding people having informed consent, but I'm not seeing actually the trap around. It's like, I'm like, oh yeah, that's good for people to not have informed consent. And we want to just only teach them the small palatable bites, right? So that was wild to read. And also, along with that was just this sentence that I wrote. It's hard to talk about family and eternal family in part-member families, I'm learning. Which is the understatement of the century, right? It's, but it's just, yes, it's like, the thing is, families can be together forever, but only if everyone is following the rules and believing the same, right? So, obviously, the message of eternal families, at least the Mormon way, is not warm, fuzzy, wonderful feelings if part of you are believing this and part of you are not, right? Then it's like, oh, this is actually one of the main points of conflict in our family. Yeah, and I would have hoped that I would have sort of recognized that situation and recognized the inherent conflict there, but it seems like I didn't. It seems like I really was just now, for the first time in my life, starting to see how the church's teachings of eternal families was actually creating like distress and division, and was like not fun and not very loving for part-member families. And it's also weird to think about that, because even at this point I had a couple older siblings who had stopped believing and were no longer like members, right? And I didn't realize that my belief in the plan of salvation and eternal families wasn't actually making me closer with my family. It was just making me have like distress. But you know, it's like I would have said no, like I love this because it just makes me feel like love, and I'm gonna work so hard to make sure we're all in heaven together. But yeah, I was like also in that situation and I just was so like trained and willfully like blind to it, which is just sad looking back on. Okay, let's keep going. Thursday, August 20th, 2015, mission day 314. Wow, today was a stretch day. No growth in the comfort zone, no comfort in the growth zone. We started out weekly planning, and Sister Frost was getting super discouraged when, bam, we got a package from her family. It was full of cute bug-eyed pens, a robot cube man, and a good card from her family. That was heaven sent. Then we basically tracked it all day. We found a lot of people, got in straight at the first door. Mandy and her son Morris. We knocked on. She said her husband is Mormon, and her son had a question about why God lets evil happen. We taught her and her son the plan of salvation, set up a weekly visit, and then went on our way. Using our awesome tracting approach, we taught 2 lessons. This morning, it got cold enough to run... Oh, this should be a separate paragraph, but it's not. Okay. This morning, it got cold enough to run with my lightweight coat, but the rest of the day, it was about 94 degrees Fahrenheit, so not too shabby. Our appointment in Tioga fell through, so we just drove around trying potentials and knocking doors. The last one we tried was Audrey, and she said she's not a believer anymore. And Sister Frost was given what to say, and I gave her a POS pamphlet, or plan of salvation, and then we came back. This sounds depressing, so I'll just say I'm going to fast for Sister Frost starting tonight. I think she's emotionally and spiritually exhausted. But a lot of awesome things came to pass that I haven't even mentioned. You know that eggplant Laurie Wade gave us yesterday? Well, I just threw it together into fried chips, and I made a tartare/fry sauce that went well with the fishy taste of eggplant. The recipe was promptly written. Smiley face. Sister Frost made us a frozen yogurt mango treat we'll eat tomorrow. I also loved my studies today. In Alma 38, I learned that in order to rely on the Lord, all we have to do is keep the commandments and pray. Smiley face. Grace and atonement and humility and prayer, all connected. The gospel is amazing. I love being a missionary, especially now when it's not terrifying to knock on strangers' doors all day. Sister Frost sure is brave. So overall, I'm seeing a little bit more of the me feeling worried for Sister Frost and me feeling, I think it makes sense that I was like, oh man, Sister Frost is having a hard time and that sucks and I wish I could help her feel better. But more than that, I had this like mandate to like make her be happy, and if she wasn't happy, it was like my fault. So it was very distressing for me, very guilt-inducing, very like, what do I do? So, yeah, it was very sad for us to run into someone who was ex-Mormon. Well, I don't even know if this person would have considered herself to be ex-Mormon, but she said she's not a believer anymore, so, we, said our piece and then left, and it was depressing, so yeah, end to a long, hard day, and I'm like, I think Sister Frost is just exhausted emotionally, spiritually, probably physically as well. So what am I going to do about it? Am I going to be like, hey, let's take a second and let's just like sit and talk about it and like, what's going on? And like, what are you feeling? And like, let me just like, you want to just like have a minute to like talk about it and like maybe, I don't know, maybe we like take more time to like just sit and vent, or I don't know, you know, sort of anything to address it. No, of course not. So what I do is I'm going to fast for Sister Frost. And that was my go-to, and I was just always like wanting to fast and pray for her to feel better. And I don't know. I mean, we'll see how I think that affects things, but honestly, I really wish I had known. Probably gonna get more results by just sitting and talking about it and holding space for her to be able to, like, letting her be unhappy and letting her be honest with me that it sucks sometimes, right? Rather than like, I'm gonna secretly fast and pray for you constantly so that you feel better, otherwise I feel bad, right? That's just such an unhealthy dynamic. Ugh. Also, I just gotta point out getting like the first door we knock on, someone letting us in, that felt like a sign from God that we were like at the right place at the right time, you know, when, you know, we just really just, that's just kind of how it happened. But whenever something like that happened, I've felt like it meant a lot. And it also seemed like it meant a lot because it turns out she was married to a guy who's Mormon. So we're like, oh my gosh, we're going to save your family. And then the question from her son was, why does God let evil happen? And I just got to point this out because at the time, that was like a gold mine, perfect question for someone to ask us, because we're like, oh, I can tell you exactly why God lets evil happen. And then we pull out the Plan of Salvation pamphlet and we teach them about the point of life and God and the reason that he's created all of us and the reason we're all here and why exactly bad stuff happens and how we can deal with stuff, etc. Anyway, though, it turns out that's actually kind of the question that got me to no longer believe in the church/God. Because it turns out when I actually really honestly interrogated that question, and as I just saw more and more of the evil, maybe evil is too extreme of a word, but I certainly saw more and more of the not good things and the suffering needlessly on purpose that was happening even within the church of different people, let alone like outside the church, the way that the church was influencing the world. I was just, the more and more I was like, it's not even just that evil exists in the world, but like, why is God's own church doing evil things? This feels wrong. So yeah, that exact question, which used to be such a good question when I was a missionary for me to get people interested in the church, was eventually the question that led me out. So that's interesting, right? Okay, continuing forward. Friday, August 21st, 2015, mission day 315. I feel so good, smiley face. Fasting is so powerful. If my kids ever go on missions, I think one of my main tips will be to fast for their companions. I was really praying that Sister Frost would get whatever she needed so that she could feel/see success and find joy in the journey. And then we had a great study on prophets, and she studied even extra during lunch while I took a nap. We had dinner with them. I didn't write who, but I'm guessing the Wade family. and taught prophets, and he had one question about how prophets are called, and then he had no questions. Yep. We taught so clearly the Spirit could clear everything up, and he committed to learn that Joseph Smith is a prophet. And then in parentheses I wrote, read, pray, church, because those were the 3 basic things that we would tell everyone. Woohoo! He's totally gonna be baptized. Most of our day was sucked up by district meeting. Sister Blackshire gave us a ride, which was awesome. Save on miles and have time with a sweet, sweet family. Smiley face. Madeline, Lillian, Cadence, Sierra, and Ava. A family of sisters. Totes fun. The newspaper lady called us back today. It was so scary because we don't want to do it anymore. We'll just call her tomorrow and be flaky and change our minds. Well, tomorrow is also Sister Frost's month anniversary, so I'm getting creative real quick. I'm thinking cantaloupe, card scavenger hunt, homemade lunch, etc. I only have $3 left on MSF. Smiley face. Oh, sister! Ah! Oh my god. I was doing the best that I could with a really bad toolbox. In a way, I wish I could have done less of my best. You know, I wish I could have had more permission to not do my best. I feel like that would have been actually better for me, but well, let's talk about the fasting. So, I guess we did end up having a pretty successful, as we would have called it, lesson with Brother Wade, and we cleared up his concerns about prophets. So hopefully he was gonna pray and go to church and feel the conviction that Joseph Smith was a prophet, and so that was encouraging, I guess, and it felt like, okay, look, I fasted and I'm praying really hard for Sister Frost to, like, whatever she needs to feel successful and feel joy, like, if that can happen. And then this lesson happened, I was like, great, it worked. Which, you can see how I'm just getting more and more kind of tied up in knots here, where I'm getting this reinforced sense that I can, like, make bargains with God to, like, make better things happen in the world, and if bad things aren't really working, then I just am, like, trying more and more, and, like, okay, let me fast again, go without food and water again, and, like, pray really obsessively, and, like, read scriptures really compulsively, and be, like, constantly obsessing about this thing in order to, like, change the way that the outcome of everything else goes. It's like, instead of me seeing that I can have some sort of impact in the world in my own small way by, like, I don't know, going and applying for a job, or going and talking to someone, or, you know, like, doing some sort of action that is within my own realm of control. Instead, what I'm learning is, like, the way that I have an impact on the world is that I, like, be a good enough daughter of God and, like, pray enough and do all of the contortions of proving my devotion so that God will give us a miracle. And this simultaneously decreases my feelings of self-determination and, like, empowerment and, like, me making a difference in the world. It increases my feelings of reliance on God for anything to happen. And then also, it's, like, disconnecting the sense of cause and effect for how things happen. So it's like, if I want to do well on a test with my missionary thinking, instead of me, like, studying for the test, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast and pray and like read scriptures and like do service. And then that's supposed to correlate with me. That's supposed to cause me doing better on a test, right? Like, I'm learning that any problem in the world, the solution is me showing my devotion to God more. So I think you can see where that would get me into trouble in pretty much any situation where the action that is needed to make a difference is something different than fasting and praying and reading scriptures, right? Most things. So that's really unfortunate. It's really unfortunate reading through that. It's really depressing reading through this and seeing the steps of me walking myself down this dark path with the greatest gusto and enthusiasm. It's very hard to watch this happening, day by day to myself as a sister missionary. I'm gonna go forward. Okay. Saturday, August 12th, 2015. Mission Day 316. What a day. And then underlined, what a day, in all caps. And then I drew a huge smiley, like, emoticon thing. So the biggest smile possible. The month-anniversary morning surprise ended up as a sticky note trail to a card in the closet with the starfish and a star that led to the oven, which contained a month-anniversary zoo celebration poem enclosed in a cupcake envelope topped with a nail polish labeled as the color of a starfish. I put it together last night. Yeah, late to bed. Then set it up while she was getting ready in the morning. It was pretty fun. Smiley face. She has the bounty on her desk in a pile now, so I think it was a success. Morning studies drug on. It was pulling teeth to get 12 week out, but we made it to lunch. This morning also, we woke up and the weather had gone from sunny 90s to drizzled 50s. Sister Frost started to freak out about not having her winter coat, and I spent half of lunch hour remembering how to dress myself for the cold. I also couldn't find my umbrella, but then I remembered I'd already put it in the Jeep, so that was good. Then the zone leader sent out a text canceling bridge call, so we had an extra hour in the rain. We decided to just go out to Sherwood an hour early. The first home we stopped at was Stella Crossley, and she let us right in. She was very different than we were expecting. She didn't seem super golden and interested yet to us. She's very stubborn and talked at us for 40 minutes straight about how happy she is being Baptist and how the unhappy one is her husband. She even said that if he really needs a Mormon wife, they're just going to have to be divorced. Well, we'll see how it goes, I suppose. So, weird visit number 1. Then we went to Genevieve and Bruce McRae's home. Oh, this is so embarrassing. Okay. I was expecting a bitter, complaining couple hunched in a trailer next to the ruins of their scorched home. But instead, we found a super happy, pleasant, and open pair. Our first discussion, the plan of salvation, wasn't super productive, although now we know how to prepare to teach them. Also, Bruce brought up on his own that he wants to be baptized, but he's still thinking about it. I'm super excited for them. I also enjoyed sitting in the floor, surrounded by happy tiny dogs, even if my coat got pretty hairy. After those 2 visits, it was still pouring rain. I felt pretty bad for bootless Sister Frost. We drove around trying to visit people, and they weren't home, none of them. Meanwhile, the Ashlocks had purchased us a DQ, Dairy Queen gift card, and left it at the church to cover our dinner appointment. So we were going to head back, but the spirit was like, "Spirit slip, you've got something else to do here." So we pulled over and prayed, and Sister Frost was maybe frustrated, but then she pulled out Harris's record, and that felt good, so we drove over. It was like 10 miles out in the boonies, and they weren't even home, but we just started laughing at how much our umbrellas kept blowing inside out, and our hair was pretty wet dog. Smiley face. So we finally had dinner. We both got burgers, and Sister Frost got the typical cherry dipped cone, and I got a banana split. And we talked with a cute couple, and it was great. A good month anniversary. But that's not even the best part. This whole day has been perfectly arranged to the final hour. It was 8 o'clock, and our plan was to go finish tracting out the Golden Trailer Park. We tried some other trailers on the way, and although we were ridiculously happy and excited to work in the rain, we just weren't feeling it. So we went to the other one. I remember in the prayer saying that we knew we needed to be tracting, and we knew He, uppercase He, would lead us to those who were prepared for the gospel. Then out we went. The first trailer door was obviously not full of people, so we went to the cute house across the street and knocked on the door. A big man opened it and peered out, dumbfounded. He asked what we were doing in the rain, then insisted we come on in. We asked if his wife was home, and he said she was, although she was sick in bed. So we went in, sat on the couch, met Cliff, and opened with a prayer. He then went on to open to us his whole ... all of his life concerns. He used to be a strong Lutheran, but people have been terrible and all for the gain with him, so he's now agnostic. He's frustrated at God because so much evil is forced upon so many innocents. He did the best he could raising his children, but now his son Randy is in jail. He'd just gotten back from going to see him. He has no trust in anyone. He hasn't seen God answer his prayers. He doesn't even pray anymore. It was a time for us to just sit and listen. We tried to do the POS pamphlet, Plan of Salvation, but that just pulled out more of his frustration with religion and people's ridiculous optimism. The world, he assures us, really works by backstabbers, and you just have to take care of yourself. At one point, I told him that I know Christ felt it all, which he didn't exactly dismiss. But when we were ending, he was so open about reading the Restoration and the Book of Mormon, because he saw that we were unshaken by everything he'd just said, and he wanted that. We scheduled a visit for next week, and he said the closing prayer and thanked God for sending us there. And he asked for us to be protected and blessed, and for our faith to be strengthened, and for his to be strengthened as well. Oh yeah, we also told him our actual names. It was kind of like a Gwen and Ed Alton thing. Exclamation point. We are so excited to teach him, and hopefully we can teach his wife Jolie too. It's so amazing how everything lined up. If we hadn't gone to the Harrises before coming back to Golden Valley, he would have still been on the road visiting his son. If it hadn't been raining like crazy, he wouldn't have let us in. If his wife hadn't been sick, he said she wouldn't have let us in. We got home at 9:20, but I'm not even annoyed about that. What a cool last month anniversary present for Sister Frost. The blessings of being obedient and working no matter what till 9 o'clock. Wow. So that was a lot. There are too many things I could talk about, and this would be 4 hours long. So a lot of this stuff you're just going to have to sort of mull over yourself and recognize that even if I don't discuss how kind of crazy making something is, that doesn't mean it's not crazy making, and you're absolutely right to be like taken aback by a lot of the things that I was writing down today. So let me just tell you what I'm deciding to focus on. First of all, I'm focusing on how this is Sister Frost's month anniversary, so she's now been out for a month. And I did my best to have a big celebration for her, which was sweet. I hardly had any money left, and I'm glad that I could do something for her. But I thought it was really weird that it's like I set up this big elaborate scavenger hunt, like how Sister Snow had done for my birthday. Gotta remember the pen name, the fake name. So Sister Snow made a cute scavenger hunt for my birthday, and I was like, that's so fun, so I wanted to do it for Sister Frost. And I got it all set up sneaky while she was getting ready, and then it sounds like we just didn't even talk about it. I just wrote, it was really fun putting it together, even though I was up late, and I wrote, she has the bounty on her desk now, so I think it was a success. Like she just went around and got it, and then we didn't even talk about it. We just went on with the day as normal. I don't know. It was really strange to me to read. Also, another thing about Sister Frost. So she had been out for a month, and it was August, right? So it makes sense that she wouldn't have a coat yet. But yeah, it was cold that day, getting cooling off. And she was freaking out that she didn't have her winter coat. And at the time, I was like, oh, yeah, that's too bad. Oh, well, let's keep going, right? Like, not realizing and, like, that the responsible adult thing to do is, like, you're right, that's important. Let's put a pause on the other things that we want to do, because the most important thing is taking care of our bodies and taking care of our health and wellness. So we're going to go to the mall and get you your warm winter clothes and your rain clothes, right? Like, we totally, in theory, had the resources and the freedom to do that. But because we were missionaries, we did not actually really have the freedom to do that. I think that there are, depending on the companion you have, you might have someone who's a little more flexible, but because Sister Frost had me, I was obviously not flexible at all with the rules. So I was like, it's not snowing, so it's not enough of an emergency that we have to drop everything and go get stuff. So we're just gonna have to, like, plan it out, so whenever we have a training meeting or something in the city, then we'll go and, like, we can do your shopping then, but we're not just gonna do that now, right? Like, I don't think it would have even occurred to me that was an option. I just was like, oh, she's freaking out that she doesn't have her coat. Oh, well, right? I was just, like, so disconnected from my responsibility and my, like, both my responsibility and my, like, power as an adult, like, as a person. I was 20 years old at this point, but I wasn't able to freely decide for myself that we should go get someone appropriate winter clothes, right? Isn't that weird now, looking back on? But also, I can totally remember the state of mind where that I wouldn't even think to stop what we were doing, right? So that's really jarring and strange to look back at. And then I wanted to point out our interaction with Stella Crossley, the stubborn Baptist woman, as I wrote it. And I just, honestly, when I was reading through this, I was just kind of giggling with joy, and I was like, hell yeah, Stella, you're so cool. I was so impressed, and I thought Stella was so cool when I was reading over this again and typing it down. I was like, what a kick-ass lady to be like, okay, I'm married to this Mormon guy, and okay, the missionaries are gonna come over and talk to me. All right, they can come over, but I'm gonna tell them what I think, and I'm gonna say, if my husband really needs a Mormon wife, he could just divorce me. Like, how cool to just, like, be yourself. And of course, right, that was the opposite of everything I had been trained my whole entire life that a woman is supposed to be, let alone a wife and mother. You know, you're not supposed to be stubborn. You're not supposed to tell someone else your opinions and take up their time. And you're not supposed to go against your husband. Like, what? I was like, this is so Twilight Zone for my LDS upbringing brain. So the way that I framed that interaction was very telling, you know. I was like, she's not interested yet. I was like, of course at some point she will be, but she's not interested yet. And I said she's stubborn, and I didn't say we talked with her. I said she talked at us. Yeah, so interesting, right? Then I also got to point out the really embarrassing thing with the McRaes. Oh, man. I can't believe... I mean, I can, but I can't. Oh, my gosh. So, when we met Genevieve and Bruce, who were, by the way, two of the most wonderful people, like, I've ever met. They were so kind and welcoming and friendly and open. And we, or at least I, was obviously, like, super judgmental and self-righteous around them. And, like, I guess when we met Genevieve, we weren't at their house. Like, somehow we ran into them, and we had learned that they, like, their house had burned down, so they had a trailer on their property, like, trying to deal with the situation, right? And I can't believe, like, well, I guess at least I was being honest. I don't know. Let me just read again what I wrote down and how, you know, I'm just saying this is so embarrassing for me now, but it's just so telling of how far along I was on my mission that I had such a judgmental viewpoint of people at this point. I was, like, on a different planet. So here is, once again, what I wrote about the McRaes. I wrote, I was expecting a bitter, complaining couple hunched in a trailer next to the ruins of their scorched home. Like, what an unkind description. But then what ended up happening was that I found a super happy, pleasant, and open pair. And I'll also point out that I wrote the word pair because we found out that they weren't married. So I was not going to give them the honor of being recorded as a couple, or, like, you know, like they weren't serious or legitimate in my eyes because they weren't married. But that is so cruel and vindictive and judgmental now, I can see looking back on. And I hope I didn't, like, treat them poorly, but I'm sure in some ways I did, right? I'm sure I was like, oh, you should really get married, you know, like, thinking that I was coming from a good place and, like, wanting for them the best, but also in that act of wanting the best for them and thinking, like, having good intentions, actually in that, because of that, like, infantilizing them and not believing or valuing their own choices and their own worldview, right? It's like, this is what happens when missionaries have fully bought into everything, and now it's like, oh, I am the messenger of the Lord, and I am the one with the full truth, and maybe they have parts of the truth, but they don't have the whole truth. And it's my job to go out and save everyone and tell them what's what. And it's so not good. And it's very, very embarrassing to look back over. And also, like, obviously, I was being taken advantage of for me to get to that point. So I'm not, like, saying that I was only a victim in this situation. I was also perpetuating this bad system. But I can see that I was groomed my whole life to see people this way and to act this way, and then particularly on my mission, it was like, this is what you're supposed to do. So that's just really not good, right? And I gotta finish with, oh gosh, I gotta remember his fake name, because I really don't want to say his real name, and his real name is still very prominent in my mind. Cliff. Okay, I don't remember so Cliff, the last guy we went to, and he was like, actually, he like poured out his heart and soul to us, right? And it was just kind of, it seemed like the end of a day of miracles where it just, everything worked out, that we ended up being there the one time where we were able to like get through to him and like actually talk to him. So it felt really miraculous. It felt really divine. It felt like God's hand was in it, right? But just reading through this again was like, oh my gosh, this is like the same. I'm pretty sure the situation we were in when we knocked on his door to go in and meet him, I think is like the situation for how the missionaries in the movie Heretic, the horror film Heretic, around sister missionaries, like how they like get started in that like the bad situation where they're like trapped, and that's like concerning, right? That like, fortunately, when we met Cliff and it was raining and dark, and we're like, he's like, oh my gosh, it's raining, come inside. And we weren't allowed to go in if there was not a woman also present. Which, I mean, if you think about women who exist like Ghislaine Maxwell, that's not always going to make you safe, but it's certainly, in general, like, at least there's two people in the home, right? So you're probably a lot more likely to be safe than if it's just you and some random guy, right? But that aside, like, he totally could have lied to us, and I kind of remember this meeting and being kind of uncomfortable and like, is his wife actually home? But we just went in, and then like we could hear her coughing or like sneezing or something in like another room, but we were like in his living room just with him, and that was like definitely bending the rules. But this whole situation was just, I thought it was just a big miracle, and now looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're so lucky that we were not headlines in the newspaper like a week later, which is like really dark to say, but it is true. And I have talked about how missionaries are not always safe, and at least until like the last couple of years have not even really had safety training like at all. And I mean, there's a lot of Mormon stories, interviews of people who've gone on missions. There's a guy who recently shared his experience being a missionary in Russia, and it was just a couple years before my mission, I think. And he was a victim of like violence, and he witnessed like murders, like, and he and his companions and the missionaries around him were like constantly being stalked and threatened and like violently assaulted on their mission. And so even though I was fortunate on my mission, like on this day where things could have gone horribly wrong, like there are missionaries where that did happen, and the ones who survive it live with like the PTSD for the rest of their lives, and that's like horrible. So I just have to mention that. I have to bring it up because it's important. And if you are a missionary by chance listening to this, please take care of yourself. Please, if it's a dangerous situation, don't just rely on God to protect you, because even if you believe in God and at some point you're listening to this, which honestly, there's probably no missionaries listening to this, but there have been missionaries who have been assaulted, harmed, attacked, murdered on their missions. So whether or not you believe in God, at least know that your God does not always protect missionaries from the bad choices of other people, right? Maybe sometimes people are miraculously saved from what could be a bad situation, but many times, if you're looking at this from the worldview of the Mormon God, many times God just lets people make bad choices and hurt and harm other people, including missionaries. So just like be aware of that, and try your best to not put yourself in bad situations, and if you are in a bad situation, like, advocate for yourself, and like, if you have to, like, go home from your mission, right? And if something bad happens to you, it's not your fault. It's the fault of the person who does the bad thing. Rant aside, of course, after we listen to Cliff and we hear him say all of his real adult concerns and experiences, we're like, well, we have the answer to everything, and we still believe, so you should too. And he was struck by that. He was struck by the conviction of two young women who were giving up volunteering some of the most important years of their lives for setting up the rest of their lifetime with, like, career and stability and stuff. Instead of doing that, we were missionaries. We were going out telling people that they need to be more faithful, right? So he really liked the conviction that he saw, and some part of him was drawn to that. And that just shows you how like the sort of the system of missionaries is in itself sort of inherently manipulative, right? Because, like, if you're judging the truth of some spiritual concept just based off of how much other people believe it, and you open yourself up enough to let them come to your home and you share with them, like, some of the biggest questions that you have about life and some of your biggest pains, and then you see people who are like, well, I really believe this, that is obviously going to feel really powerful, and it's gonna feel like important and meaningful, and in a way it is, right? It is meaningful when you meet people who really believe something. But the problem is, Sister Frost and I, well, okay, I can't speak for Sister Frost, but I can speak for myself. I personally was 20 years old. I had grown up with only this perspective. I had grown up with the perspective that only this perspective was valid and good and true and real. And I didn't even know all of the real history and real teachings of what I was so fervent a missionary of, right? I, at this point, didn't really know about, like, polygamy. Like, I knew that, like, for some reason, like, Brigham Young was, like, doing polygamy, and, like, some of my early ancestors had done it, but, like, I just was like, oh, well, it was just because, like, just don't think about it, and they just, like, had to take care of the ladies who, like, lost their husbands or something, and, like, I didn't know the full extent of it. I didn't know it extended to Joseph Smith, and I didn't know so much. And so just this system of sending out young people who have been taught and indoctrinated this stuff their whole lives, and them talking to just everyone and finding people who are vulnerable, and it's just very exploitative, right? I've talked about that a lot, so I don't want to say it all again, but that's what I'm saying. Okay. Last day. Here we go. Sunday, August 23rd, 2015, mission day 317. Church was great. Smiley face. I enjoyed branch conference immensely. We got another cute couple that moved into Tioga, the Rosenblums. Sister Rosenblum has princess hair. Smiley face. After our awesome enchiladas and homemade ice cream dinner with the Pittingers, we had a fun episode with getting a grasshopper out of our car. Oh, yeah. And then we tried larks. We didn't get in with anyone, but we did have a surprise visit with Adeline Mixon, a missionary in waiting. She was just freaking out about being a missionary, so we talked about her concerns, and before we left, I remembered looking at 1 Nephi 17:13 in studies, so we had her read it. She started crying and said it was exactly what she needed. We found Doretta while tracting. She cried during the first vision and accepted a prayer and an extra hug. I want to see what it was that we read to the young lady Adeline Mixon, who was freaking out about going on her mission. I'm curious. Let's see. 1 Nephi 17:13. Wow, I have this one super highlighted in many colors with lots of things drawing lines from one section of words to the next. So clearly I really liked this one. Alright, it says, "And I will also be your light in the wilderness, and I will prepare the way before you, if it so be that ye shall keep my commandments. Wherefore, inasmuch as ye shall keep my commandments, ye shall be led towards the promised land, and ye shall know that it is by me that ye are led." That does make sense, actually. Pretty good pick. Yeah, it was one of my favorite things to be so versed in the scriptures that I could find that someone could be saying, like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so worried about this whatever thing," and I would be like, I have the exact perfect scripture for this, and I can read something that's going to be perfectly comforting for this exact situation that you're in, and it's going to be like, it's going to feel like God's talking to you, and it's going to feel like, here is God's promise for you in this exact situation of what you need to do, and like, don't worry, he's there for you. I really loved doing that. It felt so powerful, and it felt like I didn't know how to comfort people necessarily, but I knew that God could comfort people. So I really liked helping people, and I really liked being able to be there for people, and this was the way that I did that. So I couldn't say, I didn't really feel confident in like listening to someone and saying like, wow, that's really hard, but like I know you, and I know like you're gonna figure this out, and like maybe it doesn't feel like that right now, and that's okay, but like you're incredible, and I know like you're gonna get this, and I'm here with you, like I can help you, I'll be here with you, and like you've done so much already, you've figured so much out that like you've got this. I didn't feel comfortable saying that. I didn't know how to say that. I didn't feel like I was allowed to say that. But what I did feel like I could say was, here's what God promised you. God will lead you. Where you go will be the promised land. And as you go there, you will know that God is leading you. So this thing that you're being asked to do is really scary. But those feelings that you have about, oh, I'm not sure if I want to do this, that doesn't mean maybe you should think about whether or not you want to do it. That just means, oh, Satan's trying to get in your head, and like don't worry, like, just keep going and, like, just be obedient and keep the commandments and just keep focusing on God and focusing on being obedient and doing all the things. And as long as you do that, you will feel comforted. Which also then implies if you're not feeling comforted, it means you're not doing enough. Which, rabbit hole, right? But there's what I shared with Adeline Mixon. I think we'll find, I don't know if I write about it, so I'll just tell you now. She does not go on a mission. I'm pretty sure she gets married, like, while I'm there, or, like, not long after. She's pretty young, too. So that's something. I'll point out the Rosenblums moved into town, because we do spend a lot of time with them later, and I was very impressed by Sister Rosenblum because she had really long hair, and that was something that I always really wanted. Obviously, I like a long hair, but so I was like, oh, wonderful, wonderful person with long hair. I gotta she's my new role model. I was always looking for more role models of like Mormon moms and Mormon wives, because I didn't realize it. I didn't realize I was worried about that inevitable next stage in my life of sort of losing my full identity and giving everything up to the greatest calling and the greatest cause of all, to losing myself as a wife and mother, right? I didn't realize I was feeling a lot of trepidation around that, and I already had plenty of examples of that. Like, that was literally all I had seen growing up, and I had mom and older sibling who was doing it, but that wasn't enough. I was always looking for more people as proof and validation that I was going to be okay, and that you can be a stay-at-home young mom and be totally fine and happy and everything's good actually. And I think we're going to see me more and more as we go, kind of writing about these different women who are happily fulfilling, at least in my eyes, their divine role as being a Mormon wife and mother. And I'm desperately trying to give myself some confirmation that that is going to be my situation as well in the future. And I'm just gonna love it. I'm just gonna love it. I'm just gonna love it. We'll see. And that's my 47th week as a Mormon sister missionary. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast if you want to continue following my story. Please rate and review this episode, and please share this with anyone you think would be interested. I hope you have a great week, and if you want my advice, just remember that you can love others best when you love yourself first. Bye!